I believe that we can fundamentally shift the future of education in our city. I believe that we can create a system that the world will dream to emulate here in Chicago. And I believe that we can scale the innovations that are being incubated every day in Chicago's classrooms around the world. Now, why is it that all of you seem to be looking at me like I'm completely out of my mind? To be honest, this is not the first time that a group of people have looked at me as if I was completely crazy. And I'm going to back up and just tell you a quick story about what led me to go and create this public school in a dental tool factory when I was 23 years old. I actually decided to go to graduate school in England, and upon arriving there, I realized that I was 6 days early before my first lecture. And so as I was meandering through town, I saw this sign, and it said, EasyJet, 10 pounds flight from London Stansted to Prague. And I was fascinated. How exotic, I thought. The honesty is, I really didn't actually know where Prague was at the time, but no big deal. I went down to the Cambridge Public Library and I picked out a book, and I found out that, of course, Prague is in Czechoslovakia. I didn't realize that, it was now 2001 at the time, and this book was published in 1989. But with so many old buildings, what could have possibly changed in the past 12 years? So off I went, EasyJet flight 3065 to Prague. And as I read my in-flight magazine, I became a little worried because I couldn't actually find Czechoslovakia on the map. Something called a revolution. But stepping off that bright orange and white plane, I had never felt so exhilarated in my entire life. And it wasn't necessarily because I had arrived in this country that I didn't realize didn't still exist, but it's because the person in the seat next to me actually invited me to go to dinner with them that evening at their house. So over these plates of goulash and sauerkraut, I grew mesmerized hearing about their childhood education and how their experience was so vastly different from my own experience. So fascinated by this, I inquired whether or not I could visit this place that they had called school. So I showed up at this building that was actually older than my country, and I couldn't believe what I saw. I saw students engaging with their professors like peers, debating these issues that were facing their city at that time. Forget the outdated textbooks. They were engaged in this debate about what was affecting them at that given moment. And before I knew it, I was dashing off at every moment I found. I got pretty good at writing my dissertation on rickshaws and buses and airplanes as I made my way through Europe and eventually through the Middle East and through South America and eventually Africa. And I'll never forget that moment when I stepped into that Guinea-Bissauen classroom and there in the small dirt floor, the sparse room in this rural village, and there were 40 children looking at me. They didn't have many resources or pencils or books per se, but they had 40 of the most vibrant smiles I had ever seen. And it was here that these learnings of this global expedition came into focus. I realized this community was using the resources that they had creatively. They were overcoming the scarcity by using their community, using local people in their neighborhood to incubate these innovations inside and outside the classroom. They were developing these methods and materials organically based on the challenges that were facing their community at the time, rather than looking at any sort of higher authority. The students were truly engaged and respected by their learning environment. And it wasn't because it was trendy, it's because it worked. So the more I saw this, the more I wondered why the innate curiosity of children flourished in so many places. Why some cultures seem to cultivate this creativity and create these magical and sacred spaces for children to learn. And so these questions eventually brought me to over 80 countries across the globe, where I found answers to some of these questions about the role of school. But when I moved to Chicago 11 years ago, what I realized very quickly is that I was living in a city where in my own backyard, there were tens of thousands of children who lacked access to a high-quality public education. And I wondered, how could this be in Chicago, this amazing city with these incredible resources? How is it that we are not providing these children with this opportunity to be in love with learning? I was enraged. So what does a naive, idealistic 23-year-old do, you might ask? Well, I jumped on my bike, of course. I rode down Clark Street to the Board of Education, and I explained to them, we just need to reimagine the future of education in our city. And yes, they looked at me the way that you were looking at me just a few moments ago, wide-eyed. But you know, after 2 denials and 3 years of holding this fervent belief in a better tomorrow, the Academy for Global Citizenship was approved as a Chicago public charter school, and we opened our doors in 2008 in that dental tool factory with our first students. And yet, with our idealism, all of our idealism, we opened those doors and we realized that 89% of the students who had entered our school were already failing. They were not meeting those standards. But we believed that every student in this school could fall in love with learning the same way those students in Guinea-Bissau. And today, the academic outcomes 5 years later speak for themselves. We now have 33% of our students are now outperforming our nearest neighborhood public school by 33 percentage points. But the national and international interest in our school has allowed me to start traveling again, begin collaborating with educators across this country and around the world, talking about the challenges and solutions that are being incubated in our classrooms every day. And what I've realized is that the problem is not necessarily that there isn't innovation happening all over the city of Chicago in our classrooms. The problem is we're lacking this mechanism that allows educators to evaluate the outcomes associated with the implementation of these innovations, and a mechanism that allows us to efficiently and effectively share the innovations that are happening all over our city. And so I started asking these questions. What if we could track the results of these innovations? What if teachers locally and around the world could contribute to and learn from the successes and the failures that were happening? What would happen if we transparently allowed this data to be published in a way that enabled Chicagoans to get involved in supporting the implementation happening in their neighborhood public school? And how could we use this wealth of data, this wealth of information, to inform policy and to push our district forward? Well, enough what ifs. I'm developing a technology-based platform that enables teacher-led instructional innovation with an emphasis on transparently tracking results so that every Chicagoan has the ability to be a part and contribute to this innovation happening in their schools. You may know that the theme of Chicago Ideas Week, one of the themes is Make No Little Plans. And our vision is to impact 20 million students by 2020. I believe that Chicago will shift the future of education across this country. Let's add another star to that Chicago flag. So Chicago, I ask you, I stand here a matter of blocks from 125 South Clark Street, only a handful of years later after that first initial bike ride down to the Board of Education. And I ask you today, with this same determination and belief and idealism intact, to join me on this journey of reimagining the future of education in Chicago. Thanks.